Oh, hi! This week, how to explain what we're doing. We're making a dress, but it's a little more than making a dress. It's like messing around with pattern stuff because, listen, I finally made a mock-up of something. I'm currently wearing it, just this short sleeve stripy dress. Pretty simple, has an elasticated waistband, and I did a bunch of pattern matching on the side that I'm real proud of. It's a bit long though, and the waist is sitting up kind of high. So I thought I'd walk you through the process on how I made these tweaks to the pattern, because I feel like I hear people talk about mock-ups, and this is not a particularly fitted dress. It's a knitted t-shirt pattern with a circle skirt on the bottom, so it's not technically involved. There's no darts or anything to mess with. I would like to progress to that, but I figure we can learn together this year. Pattern drafting and tweaking and stuff is something I really want to get into and learn and excel at this year, so fingers crossed we can get there. This feels like a little dipping our toes in the water type adventure. So if you just want to know what pattern I'm making this dress from, McCall's M7313, and I'm doing style E, although I realized that the skirt just needed to get trimmed down. There were two different skirt lines to go with, so I cut the extension bit off, and this will have a shorter skirt. Even though I've already made this once and know where I see the issues, I'm not calling this the final version because yes, I've made tweaks to the pattern, but I don't know if these are going to fix the issues or not. I think it's working towards what I want, but I won't know until I have made it and put it on if it was a success or not. So yeah, this dress I'm currently wearing, what a surprise, it's stripes, and what a surprise is black and white stripes. And also, not surprising, I'm wearing this color teal, kind of an emerald green, and the new dress is out of essentially the same color, just a slightly darker, more blue toned teal, which I'm here for. I want to let myself embrace that basic Hot Topic bitch and wear a lot of black and white stuff because I like it, but for some reason I just strayed very far away from it for a while there. But in recent years I have discovered my love for jewel tones, and also black and white's just a good neutral. It can go with any of the things. I think I finally started to find my style the past year or two, and that's been very nice. In addition to this being like an emerald green, dark teal situation, it also has stripes, but the stretch goes a different direction than this one, so this is actually going to be a pinstripe dress, which I don't think I have. That covers the fabric. It will have an elasticated waistband. I will show you the couple tricks I learned from doing this pattern, because this is the joy of trying just whatever pattern. It looks pretty basic and not particularly challenging. There were two techniques I have never even heard of before, and I'm pumped about them and will be using them in future, especially the waistband situation, because it would never have occurred to me to do it this way. I am so glad I actually read the instructions. I did do some things a little differently because for some reason, most patterns I have used, how you insert the sleeve once the side seams and the shoulder seams are together, so there's a hole you gotta fit it into, 100% of the time I would rather flat lay it and then do the underarm seam into the side seam in one go. Does that not seem easier? I made some tweaks just because I know better for myself how I like to do some things, but I still listened to certain instructions and learned some things. Speaking of the patterns, this dress I just made straight with, whatever size seemed closest to my measurements. It's not too bad. Again, we weren't going with particular precision with this because it's a knit, so I thought this would be a good starter project for this. So I would actually recommend this pattern to like anybody at any level of sewing, because as someone who's been doing it for a long time, still learn some things, but it's not daunting at all for like beginner seamstress. Give it a try is what I'm telling you. But every goddamn pattern comes on this super thin, shreddy tissue paper, and I get for packaging reasons, and like I'm sure it's super cheap and super lightweight to print it like that, but I hate it so much because it's so frail. And because a previous version of me was like, oh, but I want to trace my own patterns, so I should get my own tissue paper. I started copying patterns onto literal tissue paper, like bought from the dollar store tissue paper. Not only is it incredibly flimsy, but it's certainly not big enough for most pattern pieces because it's sheets of tissue paper. So I would often have to tape a bunch of chunks together, and it was super laborious. On top of this is not going to last that long. So for durability and size complications, I treated myself to two types of patterning paper, one of which is a slightly more durable version of it, although similar texture and not as opaque. It's just artist tracing paper is what it was called. It's like the medical paper they put on those squashy bed chair things that you sit in for an exam at a doctor's office. Not as flimsy as that. This is like one level up from that, but still super helpful for tracing stuff out. And then the thing I am most excited about, which is the bit we'll talk about at the end if all things go to plan with this green dress we're going to be making. If all the alterations are successful and it's like the final version I want to keep as a more permanent pattern for myself that I'm going to reuse a lot and won't fall apart after 2 more projects with it, I got this Swedish tracing paper. It's essentially interfacing without any glue on it. And this was more expensive than anything else I saw for pattern paper options. But I have used stuff like this before and it's great. Where if there are alterations I make down the line, I can sew little bits on. I can make like a test fit with it. Not that it'll be super precise because it's not actual fabric. It won't move like fabric. It'll move like interfacing. But I can get a general idea for stuff better with this. But I'm going to be more precious about it just because it was a lot more expensive. So only final versions I plan to reuse a lot will be made out of this pattern paper. One other more permanent type of patterning thing that I was told about last year and was very helpful, but only for smaller pieces, are these plastic dollar store cutting mats. They're in the kitchen section. I was told about them by Cheryl, my fairy god Cheryl. I have used it a bunch for my bag patterns. That's the biggest issue, is that they're small, so it can only work for smaller sized pieces. Oh, I almost forgot. I have also used just big pieces of scrap cardboard to make stuff. These are good. It's nice because it's thick and you can kind of run your rotary cutter along the edge of the pattern pieces and it's great. Problem is, I can't fold these up without wrecking them and you can't pin through them or anything. So they're kind of cumbersome and I don't really know what to do with these. This is also something I want to eliminate from my pattern stash because like it's not useful anymore. It's a good free option, but I finally decided I am worth investing in nice pattern supplies and can confirm already making my life much easier. All right, those are more general thoughts on pattern making materials. If you have go-to paper or other methods I haven't gone over, please let me know. I would love to have a discussion about this because it's something that I have been needing to improve on for a long time and just haven't done for myself. Now, let's get back into the specific dress we're working on and how I went about tweaking the pattern I have already used. So, as I mentioned, one of the issues is that the bodice is just a hair short. I mean, I can pull it down, but it wants to ride up to like not empire waist cut, but not natural waist. It's kind of this in between here is where it wants to sit. So I lengthened the bodice by about 1 inch. So it'll just sit at a slightly more flattering spot, just the smallest part of my waist. On the original pattern, there is a line, and many patterns have a line where it's the lengthen or shorten spot. Like there's a designated area for it because it's a common alteration that people need to make on their patterns because some of us are tall beans, but some of us are small beans. The problem with making patterns that are an amalgamation of all sizes is that they don't actually really fit anybody well, but easy fix, especially with this big ass roll of paper I bought myself. Can you tell I'm like proud of myself for getting myself a thing? Because I never do shit like that and I'm just real pumped. It has already made such an improvement on my prep stages. My goodness. Think of all the things we're gonna do together. I just rolled out some of the new paper and took some washi tape, which is not permanent. If you haven't used it, it's very good for stuff like this. The tissue paper pattern is still too thin to not shred when taking some of the pieces off, so I had to either cut it or like fold it over the edge, which is part of the issue with the tissue, but it came off of the tracing paper without a hitch, so already worth the investment in this paper. The beauty of it being mostly transparent is I could see my grid on my cutting mat underneath, so I could have it set at exactly 1 inch and have both pieces be parallel to each other so nothing got too cockeyed and wonky. This was an unforeseen perk of the cutting table layout that I have right now. So yeah, I just taped it in place, made the extension as big as I wanted to. Like I said, it just added 1 inch, traced around it, made sure to make notes of everything that was on the original pattern and make a note as to what the alteration was, because who knows, I may need to make more versions of this. And you know, of course, in theory, all of your pattern pieces will just live together in harmony forever, only in that one envelope. They'll never go astray. But that's not the reality of things. These will just disappear on you or end up in a different pattern pile. Future me is gonna have a lot on her mind, I'm sure, if they're working on stuff, because I never don't have things on my mind distracting me from the actual task at hand. But I forged through, and making notes like this will just make it dummy proof for myself in the future. And then yeah, I just cut it out with non-fabric shears, just paper scissors. Then yeah, once I had my pattern pieces cut out, I just cut out the fabric. It's a pretty basic pattern. It's 2 sleeves, so I just cut those out with the fabric folded, so they got cut at the same time. Both the front and back had to get cut on fold as separate single pieces. But then the skirt, it said to cut 2 pieces on fold. So the fabric was already folded in half, like how it comes on the bolt. I had pressed all of this out ahead of time, by the way. I'm taking this for serious. But then I folded the fabric over again because the joy of this being pinstriped is it doesn't matter the direction as long as I'm cutting everything on fold, like on the grain line. Whereas something like this, the order of the stripes was gonna get all hinky if I didn't do it facing the same direction. So that catches us up to this wad in my hands, which I'm going to start the basic construction. The first handful of steps is nothing riveting. I'm gonna attach the shoulder seams together, right sides together. I did give both my machines a lot of TLC. I oiled this one, I defluffed everything inside because I broke 2 needles making the t-shirt quilt and just ran through so much fucking fabric, y'all. I don't know if you saw the video. I'll put a link up here if you missed that one. Really great way for me to start off the new year. I technically finished it in December, technically, but I did post the video on the 1st and it was such a good tone to set for the year because I feel like I've already done a big challenging thing and learned a bunch and got one of my biggest whips the fuck out of my sewing room. WIP, as I recently learned, stands for work in progress, almost like a UFO pile, the unfinished object pile. Because I was watching Carrie, I will link to her in the description. If you don't know who Carrie is, she's great, but she's been doing sewing vlogs, podcast style things, and posting a ton of stuff over there, and it's been one of my favorite things to have on in the background while I'm working on stuff. She mentioned WIPs. It meant I had to go off and Google something, much like I had to Google what FYP stood for, because your girl recently got a TikTok and I am old. It makes me feel so old and out of touch. And I wasn't sure at what age that was going to happen, but apparently being on the crest of 32 is when that really drives a nail into your heart. Not that I'm upset about being in my 30s. It's just, oh right, I'm not a kid anymore. This is a thing that the kids are doing and I am not one of them. I have posted a couple TikToks. If you want to check it out, I'll add that in the description now too, but you know, I'm learning. Y'all, I was this goddamn close to getting out of 2020 without a TikTok account, but here we are. Shoulder seams have been stitched with a zigzag stitch with a ballpoint needle, specifically for knits, especially because this is very thin, like you can see through it. You can fully see through this dress. And I serged over those edges. It drives me bonkers when a seam is like flip-flopping back and forth. It's not as big of an issue on thinner material like this, but it's something that really bothers me. So I'm also going to top stitch the seam allowance back. If I felt like switching back and forth between a twin needle to get the super professional look, this would be a point in time I would use it. I will do some of the finishing, hemming and such with the twin needle, but I'm not breaking it out till the very end, because then if I am having a headache with getting it to go, we're just gonna stick with a zigzag. If you don't have a twin needle, everything I do with that, you can just do with a zigzag. Okay, now that that is zigzagged down, I'm going to attach the sleeves right sides together in this curve here, just in case you're ever self-conscious about your sewing mishaps and things, being like, oh, how do I do such stupid mistakes and mess stuff up? I've been doing this for too long. Whatever you get in your head about, just know I do it too. So here's the sleeve. It's all serged, and then I did that run of top stitching so that the seam allowance isn't flopping all over everywhere. You know what I didn't do is fucking serge this side before I then top stitch everything down. So I'm gonna sit and unpick this and redo it because I'm trying to have better standards for my own stuff. Ahoy! I had to fight with my serger for, let's say, too many minutes. So I just forged ahead and got the next couple steps done, which was just sewing the underarm and side seam as one, right sides together for the left and right side of the bodice. So this is pretty much constructed. I also serged the edge of the sleeves, and then I attached the front and back skirt panels together, right sides together, serged those. Nothing too fancy happening. We're gonna attach the bodice bottom edge, this along here, to the top of the skirt. So, you know, waist seams together, right sides together. And the joy of a skirt that's the same 2 pieces for front and back is it doesn't matter which one is facing which way. And when I'm attaching pieces like this where there's like a much smaller one attaching to a much bigger one, I do find tucking the smaller bit, so the bodice, into the skirt right sides together makes it a little bit more manageable. That way the bigger piece is on the outside, so you're not trying even harder to fit the smaller bit around the bigger bit. And for this particular pattern, they should fit together okay. Oh, hold up. I think I forgot to mention the fact that here's what you need. We're going to be inserting 1/4 inch elastic to this waistband. This is the game-changing thing for me. Not elasticated waistbands in general, but just the way that this is going in. Anyways, keep at least a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so waist seam stitched together. There needs to be enough room for the 1/4 inch elastic and then some stitching on the edge of that won't catch it, if that makes any sense. Because we're gonna take this, that should be fine. Also, I have multiple layers on under this. Probably not helping the situation. All right, once that's cut to size, I'm gonna sew the 2 ends together so you make yourself a little loop. Open up your seam allowance for that waist seam and you're gonna start tucking the elastic in, kind of sandwich it between, and then you're gonna stitch along that outer edge. Take your time with this. So I'm gonna stitch over here and make a point not to catch the elastic. And you're making a casing with the seam allowance. How cool is that? I've never heard of that before. I'm so excited about it. Maybe this is a super basic garment construction thing, but yeah. You learn new things the more you do. Okay, things have happened. My casing is done. This is what it looks like from the inside. So I basically made a casing with the seam allowance and then top stitched it down. Had I given myself more room and maybe even added a little bit more length to the bodice when I was lengthening it in the first place to account for giving myself room to stitch past where the elastic ends, and also it would be nice to have this serged. So maybe I add another length to the bodice. And I did finally switch to my twin needle, so this is what that looks like. And I'm not too mad about it. I did also serge the bottom here because for the bottom of the skirt and the sleeves, I'm just gonna fold that up twice and then do a round of twin needling to top stitch it down for a hem. So the technique I'm about to show you for the neckline, I could have also done for the bottom, but I just didn't feel like it. And there's enough stretch to this that I'm not worried about puckering or anything while I'm stitching. But I figure show you this for the neckline because it's just sharper curves where the skirt is not as sharp of a curve. So around the neckline, I did a row of stay stitching, but the purpose of this one, you can see that little edge about a 1/4 inch in this whole thing, is we're gonna fold this over and it's gonna give us a nice crisp line there. Now, the pattern says to just do that once and that's your hem. No, because that's just fold it over once and then there's a raw edge under here, which I already have that with the waistband casing and I don't like having raw edges inside my garments anymore. So I'm going to stitch that down once because this is less stretchy than this was. So I feel like folding it over the once. No, because the edge of the line of stitching I'm about to do, because it'll be a twin needle, will serve that purpose and fold it over. I think that's how I did it before. If it looks wonky, I'll report back, but I think folding it over once, stitching it, I'm using the twin needle, so there'll be 2 rows of stitching along here. I think that further in row of stitches will work the same way to fold this over again. I believe that's how it went last time. Okay, a little update. Here's what it looks like after that first round of stitching. And yes, my thought where that furthest in row stitching from the twin needle is gonna work like a set of stay stitching. Let me fold this over that second time and get that nice clean edge with no raw edges on the inside. So yay, my plan is coming together. It's a little bit like I know what the fuck I'm doing, although I worry this won't be the final version. I think I'm gonna need to add a little bit more length to this bodice the more I think about it. And I don't know if the skirt length is gonna work for me, but we'll see. That's what the fitting's gonna be for. It'll definitely still be wearable. I just don't know if it's gonna be like the ideal thing I have pictured in my head, but that's why we're here and figuring this shit out. I'm excited to have more of this color in my closet. Clearly. Okay, are we ready? Oh shit. Oh my god. Y'all, it's kind of perfect. I pressed out all of the hemming I did because things can kind of bubble up a little bit when you do a twin needle. The only area I'm finding any issue with the lack of stretch is just if I do this. It's not too bad. It's not uncomfortable. I don't think anything is gonna break, but it is, you know, just a noticeable tension here. But the skirt length is fucking perfect. I really like how it's kind of bagged out, but then it cinches in right here. And if I move side to side, it's not really wanting to work its way up. I may add like a 1/2 inch just because of the seam allowance thing. I don't know. I might do one more version with a longer seam allowance and keep this just as like the second mock-up. Listen, I'm gonna wear this tomorrow. It's too good not to. You can't really see the pinstripes from afar, but this is what it looks like in the back. And the stripies on the skirt. Oh, it's fucking perfect. You know, perfect except that one thing that I want to fix, but the length is great. Would you be interested in seeing another round of this, an update, or are you good with what I've given you? Because it's basically going to be the same thing as I'm going to add an extension cut out a new set of pattern pieces, do all of the same steps I just did for this one. Either way, I'm so pleased with how this turned out. You know, I've done minor pattern alterations here and there, and this was not that involved. It was lengthening it, and there's even a spot on the pattern for, hey, lengthen here if you need to, if you get a big long noodle body. So all in all, not particularly overwhelming, but I feel like this was a good first step because this is the kind of thing I really, really want to work on and train myself on this year. So I'm feeling pretty all right with it. I cannot express to you how helpful it is having big rolls of patterning paper, because half of the reason I put off doing pattern tracing stuff, especially I have the third Tilly book, the Make It Simple Tilly and the Buttons book. I've been putting off doing it because I didn't want to tape a bunch of colored tissue paper together and hardly be able to see the lines and not have it all done in one go and mess stuff up by taping it together wonky, and I just don't have to worry about any of that with this pattern paper. And real talk, the only reason I was able to introduce that into my workshop is because of everyone over on my Patreon. They're the ones making this happen. You know, I say this stuff wouldn't be happening without them, but like, that's the kind of shit that I mean. I wouldn't have been able to swing that otherwise, and it's huge. You are literally enabling me to follow my dreams and get better at my favorite thing. So how fucking cool is that? I can't thank you all enough, and I'm just glad you seem to like the stuff I'm putting out. I hope this was at all helpful. I will see you all back here with another video next Friday. Thank you so much for hanging out. Don't let people use your fabric shears on paper. Wouldn't it be nice if it fit the first time?